Before the noon count was finished, a staff car tore through the outer gate without slowing. And by the time guards turned toward the dust, General Patton was already stepping into the yard where a prisoner had just been pulled out of line, forcing the entire camp to freeze as officers rushed to catch up, and the reason for his arrival remained unknown, just as something hidden in the barracks threatened to surface before anyone could stop it. The disturbance began moments before the car entered the camp, when a German prisoner named Karl Ritter was suddenly ordered out of formation during the midday count. A guard pulled him aside without explanation and pushed him toward the barracks corridor instead of the infirmary, which drew attention from both prisoners and the captain watching from the office steps. Karl tried to ask what he had done, but the guard ignored him and forced him through the barracks door, while another guard blocked the entrance behind them. Several prisoners shifted in line, and one stepped forward as if to follow, but a rifle was raised just enough to stop the movement before it became visible resistance. The captain left the count area and crossed the yard, asking why a prisoner had been removed without record, but the guard at the door claimed it was a routine check. At that exact moment, the sound of an engine cut through the yard, and the outer gate opened without the usual signal from the tower. The staff car entered at speed, scattering gravel across the yard as guards turned sharply and prisoners lifted their heads to see who would arrive without warning. Patton stepped out before the vehicle had fully stopped, ignored the officer approaching him, and walked straight past the count line toward the barracks door where Karl had been taken. The captain tried to speak, but Patton raised one hand without slowing and reached the door just as a noise echoed from inside that did not sound like a routine check. He ordered the door opened immediately, and when the guard hesitated for a fraction of a second, Patton pushed it himself and stepped into the corridor. Inside, the air was still, but something had already happened, and the presence of the general had arrived too quickly for anyone to prepare a story. Subscribe for more forgotten German POW stories like this one. The escalation began inside the barracks, where Patton found Karl standing against the wall with his shirt partly open and a second guard positioned too close for the situation to be normal. The captain entered behind him, and the guards straightened instantly, but Karl did not move away from the wall until the interpreter was called forward. Patton asked one question, not about the prisoner, but about the order that had removed him from the count without record. Neither guard answered directly, and the silence stretched long enough to shift attention from Karl to the men responsible for bringing him inside. The captain demanded the logbook for prisoner movements, but the desk near the entrance showed no entry for Karl's removal. Outside, the line of prisoners began to break formation, not in protest, but because the entire yard had lost its routine and no one knew whether to move or remain still. The guard at the door attempted to close it, but Patton ordered it left open, forcing the entire scene into view of both prisoners and staff. Karl finally spoke through the interpreter, saying he had been taken before, always without record, and always returned to the line afterward. That statement changed the tone of the room, because it suggested repetition rather than a single incident. The captain ordered the barracks searched immediately, and soldiers began opening lockers, checking bunks, and pulling aside anything that could hide a record or tool. In the far corner, beneath a loose board, a strip of cloth and a broken handle were found, both marked in a way that connected them to earlier incidents. The escalation no longer depended on one prisoner's word, because the room itself had begun to speak. The major consequence unfolded across the entire camp as Patton ordered every work detail halted and every prisoner accounted for by name and location. The yard filled again, but this time not in formation, as prisoners stood in clusters while guards were reassigned under direct supervision. The captain brought forward records from the past weeks, and patterns began to emerge where certain prisoners had been removed and returned without explanation. Karl identified two others who had been taken in the same way, and both were brought forward, showing injuries that had been hidden under sleeves and collars. The doctor examined them in full view, and each mark was recorded as evidence rather than dismissed as an accident. The consequence spread to the guard units when Patton ordered every assigned pair separated and questioned independently. One guard claimed discipline required force, but his statement conflicted with the absence of official records, making the action appear hidden rather than authorized. The search extended beyond the barracks into storage areas and utility sheds, where additional items were found that suggested repeated use of isolated spaces. Prisoners who had remained silent now stepped forward in small numbers, not loudly, but steadily enough to confirm that the pattern had lasted longer than a single day. The captain documented each case, but Patton stopped him from closing the matter as routine discipline, making it clear the situation had moved beyond internal correction. By evening, the camp no longer functioned as it had that morning, because the structure of control had shifted from assumption to scrutiny. The consequence was no longer limited to the guards involved, as every action inside the wire now required visibility. The reversal came when Patton ordered the accused guards brought back into the yard, not for removal, but to stand in front of the same prisoners they had controlled earlier. The expectation among the staff was immediate punishment, but Patton delayed it, forcing the entire camp to witness the process instead of its outcome. He ordered the interpreter to read each recorded incident aloud, matching names, dates, and locations while the guards remained silent under direct observation. Then he called forward the prisoner spokesman, not to accuse, but to confirm whether the system inside the barracks had allowed such actions to remain hidden. The spokesman answered that prisoners had seen but not spoken, fearing that reporting would lead them back into the same spaces without protection. That answer shifted responsibility beyond the guards, exposing a structure where silence had protected misconduct. Patton then issued a new order that no prisoner could be removed from formation without written entry, witness presence, and visible transfer. He assigned independent observers to every movement, making it impossible for actions to disappear behind closed doors again. The guards expected removal, but instead they were left in place under stricter control, turning their position into constant exposure rather than quiet authority. The reversal forced the entire camp to change behavior, because the hidden system no longer functioned under visibility. The yard, which had been silent earlier, now held a different kind of tension, one where control had shifted without a single shout. The final irreversible event began at night, when one of the previously silent prisoners attempted to leave his barracks without authorization and move toward the outer fence. A guard spotted the movement and raised the alarm, but instead of escape, the prisoner stopped and pointed back toward the barracks corridor. Inside, another prisoner had collapsed near the same wall where Carl had been held earlier, unable to stand after trying to reveal what had happened before Patton's arrival. The doctor was called again, and this time the injury was recent enough to link directly to actions that had occurred only hours before. The captain ordered immediate confinement of the guards connected to the corridor, removing them from duty under armed supervision. Military police took control of the area, sealing it fully and preventing any further movement until the investigation could be completed. By dawn, a transfer vehicle arrived, and the guards were removed from the camp for formal charges beyond the authority of the local command. The prisoners watched from the barracks windows, not reacting openly, but observing a change that could not be reversed. The corridor was cleared, the wall repaired, and the space opened permanently to prevent it from ever becoming hidden again. When the next count began, no prisoner was removed without record, and no door was closed without witness. The irreversible change was not the removal of the guards, but the end of the space that had allowed actions to remain unseen. Days later, the camp returned to routine, but the movement inside it had changed permanently, as every order now required visibility and every action carried record. Carl stood again in formation without being pulled aside, while the corridor remained open and under watch. When the captain filed the final report, he noted that Patton had not arrived to create discipline, but to expose where it had already failed, leaving a system that no longer relied on silence to function. Most people know how World War II ended. Very few know what happened inside these prison camps. Subscribe for more untold WW2 stories.